Hey there, welcome to episode 117 of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is a couple of brand new Spawn action figures. So before I get into showing the figures, I'll just give you a very quick recap of Spawn and McFarlane Toys, the company that produced these toys. So Todd McFarlane, he's a comic book artist. I first encountered him when I was quite young. I'd started collecting the Amazing Spider-Man comics in the 280s issues. And then Todd McFarlane came on as the artist for 298. So I was still pretty fresh into collecting comic books. I was like 8 years old when Todd McFarlane came in and really kind of revolutionized the look of Spider-Man. He had this crazy dynamic art style that was so different than anything that had come before. And he kind of ushered in the era of the superstar artist. And so there was all kinds of guys at Marvel doing like really cool things. And for a couple of years, they were churning out great stuff at Marvel. But then these guys wanted to own their own creations. So quite famously, all the biggest names at Marvel left and started their own company, Image Comics. And they each created their brand new, their own character that they owned. And Todd McFarlane created Spawn. And the Spawn comic, it launched with huge numbers. It did very well. It is still going today. Some 30 years, I think Image launched in, I would say, 92. So, we're 30 years out now. And it's still going strong. Spawn has continued to be published that whole time. So that's pretty crazy. And so because this was a new character and it was a success and it made a big splash, of course, toy companies came along and they wanted to make toys of Spawn. And Todd, I guess, had met with a couple of toy companies to see what their ideas were. And he wasn't really feeling what they wanted to do. It was going to be too childish. And so Todd said, you know what, I'm going to just start my own toy company and I'll make my own toys. Which apparently everybody thought was pretty crazy. But, not really any crazier than starting your own comic book company at the time. And he did that successfully. So, he launched Todd Toys, which, so that was 1994, and he quickly changed the name, I think after only a year or so, from Todd Toys to McFarlane Toys, and he started producing his very own Spawn action figures. And I got the very first Spawn figure that he made, and I collected a number of McFarlane figures for quite a few years. Around that time, the toys that I grew up with, like the brands, like G.I. Joe, He-Man, Transformers, they were all kind of in a bit of a lull. Nothing was really happening with them. So McFarlane came in and he gave me something new to collect. And he was making toys I'd never seen before, super detailed. He was doing properties like horror movies that, hadn't had toys before. And just some really cool stuff. So I was all over McFarlane Toys for a while. But then around the early 2000s, companies like Hasbro and Mattel started revisiting the brands that I grew up with and I loved. And they started making new G.I. Joes and new Transformers and new He-Man. And I really liked those toys. And to be honest, they were more what I was looking for. They were nicely sculpted and all that stuff. But they were just more like toys. And McFarlane stuff was kind of more like statues. He was making adult collectibles. And even though they looked great, and I don't play with my toys, I just put them on a shelf to display, I still like to be able to pick it up and move it around. And I don't collect statues. There's plenty of statues available to collect, and I just don't, because it doesn't do anything for me. So I kind of moved away from collecting McFarlane toys, and I buy very few of them. I have bought very few of them in the last 10 plus years. And I was collecting Spawn every single month for, I don't know, I want to say 25 years or something. And I kind of had a falling out with Spawn too. I finally, after so many years, said, you know what? I'm not really loving this book anymore, so I think I'm going to stop collecting it. And I took a break. So I had kind of distanced myself from Spawn for a while. But then as he was leading up to his record-breaking 300th issue of Spawn, which is the longest running independent comic book ever. So that was coming up, and he kind of switched the focus of the comic book to go a little bit more back to its roots, I guess. Stop being less of a dark horror movie, which is what he'd been going for so long, and kind of go back to some more super heroics and some flashier artwork. And so that kind of drew me back. And then right around that same time, it was last February, well, so a year ago February, so just before this whole COVID nonsense hit, there was the toy fair in New York where all the toy companies go to show retailers what their products are going to be for the coming year. I watched all these videos of, reporters and YouTube guys that were there at the toy fair, and Todd McFarlane was there showing his usual stuff, like Halo stuff or whatever he was doing. And then he also had this figure on display. And he said his plans for this was to launch it as a Kickstarter. And he got a little bit of criticism for that because I think some people just feel like Kickstarter is more for up-and-comers, people that really need the money, that don't have the means to make to fund their projects. But meanwhile, Todd McFarlane has had a successful toy company and a successful comic company for decades, and people didn't seem to understand why he would need to go to Kickstarter. But he proved them wrong yet again. His reasoning being basically that he wanted to make a toy that was really big and really elaborate and not necessarily part of an ongoing line. And he said it was really hard to convince retailers to devote the shelf space to a high-end collectible that was only a one-off. And I guess retailers are turned off by that. So he said, I want to make it. The stores don't want to carry it. I'll do this Kickstarter for people that want it. They can find me. If it gets funded, we'll sell direct to them. And so he launched it in April 2020. And this Kickstarter made $3.4 million, which was crazy. Because I've seen other really successful toy Kickstarters, like the Mythic Legions ones, for example. And they've made over $1 million. And those were considered crazy numbers. But even there, the Mythic Legions was offering 25 different figures. So if you had somebody that wanted 25 figures and the figures are $50 a pop, you can imagine it gives people a lot of options to spend a lot of money. But with this, it was only 3 figures. Essentially, it was one figure in 3 different paint variations. So a lot of people would only want one. At most, they would probably want 3. So that's really only $150 per person. Now, mind you, there was some pricier things you could do. So rather than just buy the figure or just buy the 3 figures, there was autographed versions of the figures and stuff. So there was opportunities to pledge a little bit more. But even still, with so many limited options, for him to get up to 3.4 million was crazy. And it showed that there was still an audience that wanted Spawn figures. So I kind of just got back on the Spawn train. I was enjoying the comic book. So I said, I want to get on this figure. They weren't that expensive, considering, one figure was $40 US, which is pretty reasonable. That to me, that's as Canadian, that's about $55 plus the shipping or whatever. For one figure to cost me about maybe $70, it's not crazy. What is crazy is what these figures are selling for now. Here are some sold auctions that I pulled off eBay just from the last week or so. So this thing is now selling for $200 to $300 for a single figure. And because he was an established toy maker, he kind of promised a quick turnaround time. When I have backed toy Kickstarters in the past, sometimes they take 2 years because you're dealing with people that are new to the business and they have to find a factory in China, and they make mistakes and they learn from their mistakes. But Todd McFarlane's been doing this for a long time. So once he got funded, he said, I'm going to have this to you this year. Now, he didn't quite make it, but considering COVID happened, you can kind of forgive some delay. But here it is. It's April 2021. So a year out from when he first launched the Kickstarter. That's a pretty good turnaround. So I'm pretty stoked that these things finally arrived. They showed up here on this past Wednesday. Today is Sunday when I'm filming this. And it's been a long couple of days because I ordered 2 of the figures. So like I said, there was 3 available. There was what he calls the classic Spawn, which is how Spawn appeared in the first issue of Spawn. Then there was something called the modern Spawn, which features kind of some slight costume variations, some paint variations, which is how Spawn looks now. And then there was also something called the artist proof Spawn, which was this same figure in black and white. So it kind of looked like it was like a sketch. And that was cool and all, but I figured, given the price of these things, even though I said it was affordable at $70 a figure, it does add up if you're getting 3 of them. I really didn't feel I needed 3 of the same figure with slight paint variations. So I got 2. I got the classic. I got the modern, which is here in front of me. So obviously I was dying to see what these things look like. However, I usually like to do a video to show you guys what it looks like in the packaging. But I didn't really have time to do a video, and I really wanted to open this thing. It arrived around lunchtime, and I was still working from home all day. So I was like, I didn't want to sit and wait even till the end of the day. I tore one open, so here he is. I'll show you him in more detail in a second. But I did want to give you an opportunity to see me unbox one of these figures. So the modern Spawn I've been sitting on for like 5 days, and I haven't opened it at all. So yeah, I'm going to unbox this thing so you can see the presentation of it just as I saw it when I first opened this thing up. And then we'll take a closer look at the figures. So here we go. Here's the box. See, it's got the Spawn logo on there, and it's even got the Spawn logo on the tape. So let's pop this bad boy open. Alright, so here we go. So we got another layer of protective cardboard here. And I will say, these boxes actually came inside of another larger box, and they had little plastic corners on all the boxes to really make sure they didn't get banged up. So I appreciated that. Now in here, there's some like kind of tissue paper here. But you can see the Spawn logo showing through there. So this box is green. Now it's got kind of like a matte green until you get to the bottom, and then all of a sudden you get this kind of reflective green on that bottom logo. Now on this figure, it was the same box except these were red, which I'll show you that in a minute as well. Alright, so now let's get this guy out of here. Okay, so there you see the box with that reflective green, and this has got a texture to it. You can feel that on the box there. On the bottom you've got the Spawn logo in black. On the side there it's just a little date to show how long I think McFarlane Toys has been running, and the Spawn toy line. So yeah, not much else to see there. Then you can slide this sleeve off. And there we get the Spawn logo again, kind of etched into the cardboard. Little green tag. And so that matches the font on the box. On the other figure here, this was a little red tag. So that allows me to open this up. So inside, you get a certificate of authenticity. Then there's this checklist here. Now what this checklist provides you with is it shows you what the original 1994 Spawn figure came with, and then it tells you what you get with the remastered 2021 Spawn. So this seems a little self-indulgent, but whatever. So if you were curious, it talks about the articulation, the weapons, if it has chains, a cape, a comic book, the packaging, the box, the signature, and the accessories. So if you look at the number of yeses in the first column, you can see that it says that yes, it had yes, the original figure had head articulation, shoulder articulation, waist, and knees. But this figure has head, shoulders, biceps, elbows, wrists, waist, thigh, ankles, toes, and knees. And again, same with the weapons. The original figure had one weapon. This one's got like 6 or 7 weapons. The original had plastic chains. This one's got steel chains. So again, this is just him kind of tooting his own horn, showing what he has accomplished with this figure. And then you got a little foam protective bit here. And now we've got the figure. So you can see here's some of the extra accessories, which are just kind of loose here. So like there's a gun with multiple paint apps. It's a pretty big, crazy gun. Now he's got his little necroplasm. This is kind of like the energy that emits from his hands. I don't know if you can see it up on the figure here. I currently have this guy holding his like energy beam in his hand. Then there is a little necroplasm knife, so that's like a clear translucent green knife. And then there's an alternate head. So this one happens to be Al Simmons in his human form. So that's kind of cool. And to be honest, these heads are the main reason why I decided to get two. Even though I like the differences in the costumes, it would have been hard for me to decide if I wanted the red or the black costume in the classic or the modern. That alone wouldn't have been enough to make me spend the money to buy two of these. I probably could have got by with just one. But the fact is, this version comes with the classic masked Spawn head, and then it also comes with like a screaming burnt face, which I'll show you again a little bit later. This one here, it doesn't actually come with a masked head. Like if you wanted Spawn in his kind of iconic mask, and you get this figure, you wouldn't get that, because you either have the human face or the kind of hamburger head tied up with a shoelace, which I know you can't see it in there. But yeah, those were your options. So it would have been kind of a bummer to just get this figure and not have the option to display him with his mask. So yeah, anyway, so there it is in the box. Now I have to pull this foam insert out. Bear with me a second here. Alright, so that comes out of there with those little accessories just hovering around. Now you can see the figure in its kind of classic blister card. This is what you'd normally expect a Spawn figure to look like if you bought it in the store. So I can get rid of this thing now. And there you go. So there's Spawn. So you can see he's kind of tooting his own horn again here. Record-breaking comic. And again, I don't have a problem with that. If he wants to gloat, he's earned the right. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Now another cool thing about these figures that you couldn't do with the original is he's made resealable packaging. So if you're somebody that wants to take this thing out and pose it, but then you want to maybe put it back in its package and display it on a shelf like this, or pin it to the wall like this or something, you can do that. So this bubble here, it pops open relatively easily. So open that up, and then you can just shake everything out. So the first thing that comes out is the comic book. So this here, if you see it numbered, it's got the Spawn issue 1 in the corner there, but it's got a unique cover. So this is brand new artwork from Todd McFarlane on the cover of the comic. At least I believe so, yeah. It's been a while since I've seen some original McFarlane art. He doesn't do a whole lot of art. He does some covers here and there. But anyway, this one's kind of cool. It's got the green reflective logo on there, just like the packaging. Now the comic book I got with this figure has a different cover, and it's got red reflective kind of text, which would match the packaging of that figure. So let's just take a closer look at this for a second. I've only briefly flicked through the other comic I had. I assume this is the same. But so this just slides at the top there. So it's kind of got its own little slab. And now I was under the impression that this was just a reprint of issue 1, which I have. It's got an ad for the original toys on the back. So there's what the original 1994 Spawn looked like. Although we will take a look at the figure because I still have it kicking around here. But yeah, the inside of the comic book isn't an exact reprint. If you open it up, you'll notice it is in black and white. Try not to get that reflection of the light in there. And it's almost like an artist-proof book. So there's some text in there to explain the history of the comic. So it's almost like a commentary, and then you've got the black and white artwork inside. And you can even see, it might not pick up on the camera, but like you can see some of the blue line work in there under the inks. So like this is almost like if you bought one of those IDW artist proof books where you see it, the comic at its original size with the original artwork. So yeah, this is pretty neat to have. Because yeah, if it was just another reprint of issue 1, it wouldn't be very special. But yeah, the fact that it's got a little commentary and track in there means I'm actually going to want to go through this and like read it. So that's cool. All right, so let me just put this thing away again. Now again, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these comics because I keep all my comics bagged and boarded. So I'll probably take these comics out and put them in a bag and board and put it in a long box. I don't really want to leave it in here because I'm still on the fence. I don't know if I'm going to keep these boxes. The boxes are beautiful, but I don't have a whole lot of space. And my collection of boxes is already getting a little out of control. So even if I do decide to keep these, they'd end up in the crawl space, and I don't know if I want to put these comic books in there where they could get, they wouldn't be as protected from weather, the temperature and all that stuff in there. So regardless of whether I keep these boxes or not, I'll probably put these in my comic book collection. All right, so now the figure itself. Pop this out of there. Hold on to that. And yeah. This here, I think I might need my knife again. And there we go. So this is the modern Spawn outside of the packaging. Now he's got some little twist ties there that I'm going to have to cut off. Got this little kind of foam insert protecting his back to avoid like paint scraping on his cape, I assume. So yeah, I'll have to cut those ties around his leg so I can take this last piece of plastic out. But there you can see he's got some alternate hands. There's his display base behind him. So yeah, otherwise there's the figure. This is him with his like hamburger head with the shoelaces. So yeah, pretty cool, pretty cool. And my first observation right out of the gate, which is pretty cool. So one of the key differences, and again we'll do a close up where you'll see this, but so you'll see here on his chest, like it's all black instead of this figure that has the red on the chest. So there's some paint differences, and I knew the heads were going to be different. But one of the most kind of iconic things about Spawn that changed when he updated his costume was he got this big boot, which is just like a big, almost like cone around his foot, which is kind of ridiculous. Now the original figure doesn't have it. He's just got 2 standard feet. So I knew we were getting the boot on the modern Spawn, and that's the main reason I wanted this one. If I was going to buy just one, it would have been this one, but the mask is what made me get the original one as well. But if I recall, Todd had said that he would also add this gauntlet, which is another key element of the modern Spawn. He's got this big glove. But I thought he said he was only going to add that to the modern Spawn for people that bought all 3 figures. Which was kind of a bummer, and to be honest, it almost made me want to buy the artist proof version, just because I wanted my modern Spawn to have that glove, and it seemed like a bummer that he wasn't going to give that to people that just bought the modern Spawn. I don't know if he announced that he'd changed his mind on that, or maybe this is a surprise. But either way, I'm really glad to see that my modern Spawn has the gauntlet, has the boot, because it really will make this figure feel a little different than this one, and it really kind of justifies the expense to me a little bit more. So there you go. So that's my Spawns unboxing, and that took longer than I anticipated. But yeah, now we'll take a look at the figures, up nice and close, and we'll do some comparisons. So yeah, let's get into that. So here is the classic Spawn up nice and close. And yeah, you can see it's a really nice looking figure with lots of really cool sculpted details. And so this whole figure, the intent of it was to update the original 1994 Spawn figure, the first figure ever released by McFarlane Toys. So before we really get into looking at the articulation and the details of this figure, let's bring out that 94 figure and just do a bit of a comparison. So here is 94 Spawn. So right off the bat, you can see that the scale of the figure is probably the biggest difference. This guy here is about 5 inches or so, and this guy here is probably 7, even higher probably if you go right to the top of the cape. So yeah, he's quite a bit bigger. Otherwise, I think you can tell pretty immediately that this one is a lot more detailed. Like, this is a nice modern figure where this, like, in its day, this was pretty revolutionary, but it looks pretty simple compared to this figure now. For example, this cape. So McFarlane really wanted this big elaborate cape because that's always how he drew Spawn. Now, there's no joints in the cape, but you can see it's got folds, like areas where you can fold it in. Hopefully it doesn't break on here. But you can kind of display it so it would tuck around him a little bit like Dracula or something. But it didn't stay. It just kind of popped right back to where it went. Whereas this one here, it's actually got articulation in the cape, which we'll take a look at in a second. Now the cape on this one, you could take it off. So this here, this little skull thing comes off, which allow you to pull the cape off. There's this thing in the back that kind of gave support to the cape, but that just pops out of his back as well. Now for the chains, I always found these things a little awkward. These are really soft rubbery chains, and they plug into his back, and then they plug into the side of his belt. And I hope I have both chains, but I can only find one. So yeah, it's pretty lopsided looking with only one chain. If I'm unable to find the other one, I might just choose to display him with no chains, just because I think one looks weird. But for articulation, his legs could go forward and back. He could bend at the knee. No waist swivel, no ab crunch. His arms could go up and down. No ball joint, so you can't pull his arms out. And nothing at the elbow, which is kind of surprising. Nothing at the wrist. So again, the arms are pretty much just like this. It's not much different than like an old Kenner Star Wars figure. And the head, it can turn side to side, but there's no ball joint. It can't look up and down. So pretty simple articulation. And for accessories, other than the cape and the chains, he had this one board with a big nail in it. And that could just go into his hand like so. And with the new Kickstarter figures, Todd McFarlane actually did give us an update to this board. It was a lot more brutal looking than just this 2x4. But I think you only got that if you ordered the 3-pack as well. And that wasn't something I really felt I needed, so I wasn't too disappointed to not get the updated board with a spike in it. But anyway, so that's pretty much all I have to say about 94 Spawn. But before we get rid of it, another thing I want to comment on is this one has a much more classic comic book appearance, which I really like. Like, if you look at his mask, it's nice and smooth. It looks like how you'd expect Spider-Man's mask to look. Like, there's no details of his nose or his lips or anything like that in there. And if you look at his feet, that's how you expect Spider-Man's feet to look. Just like smooth toes. Because you kind of imagine he's wearing like tights, like the way Spider-Man is. And, it's very classic superhero look. All right, let's get rid of this guy here for a second. So now let's take a look at the classic Spawn figure. So at a distance, he looks a lot like the 94 figure. He looks like a classic superhero in his tights. But he's really not. Once you get a closer detail, you see his foot. You can see he's got toes that show through. which makes him seem less like a guy in tights and a little bit more monstrous. Like, is this his actual foot? Also, with his face, it's subtle, but you can see he's got these teeth showing through his mask. Like, he's got, like, it almost looks like skeletal. And it's cool, but I am glad it's subtle. So when I display this guy on the shelf, you probably wouldn't even notice it. But I think I do prefer the comic book look. I kind of would have preferred if this was flat, maybe. But it's not a big deal. Like I said, you can't really tell unless you're looking closely at it. And it is kind of a neat detail. It kind of shows the evolution of Spawn, as this is how he is portrayed in the comic books. So for the cape, so he's got the same little skull thing with the chain. Now this one is not removable, but it's also got a metal chain as opposed to the plastic chain. Same as these chains here. These are real metal with the little buckle that swings there, so that's really cool. And they're not removable, at least not intentionally. You could probably rip them off if you wanted to, but at least that way I don't have to worry about losing these ones the way I lost the little plastic ones. Now for the cape, so you can see there the bend. So this is an actual joint. So you can fold the cape back about that far, and then you can wrap it right around him like so, and it stays in place. So that's really cool. Now, I don't get quite the same effect on this side. I think maybe it gets a little caught here. Or maybe my joint is just a little stuck there. I don't want to wrestle with it too much. So there is some movement, but not as much. It doesn't wrap around quite as nicely and doesn't fold back quite as nicely either. Maybe if I just work with that a little bit. But overall, the cape is not removable. You know, there's no little piece in the back to prop up the cape or anything. It's permanently attached. And I don't really mind that, because when it's intended to be part of the figure, it kind of makes it look like a nice, solid, consistent piece. It's not falling off awkwardly. But I believe the original intent was to make the cape removable when Todd first put up the Kickstarter. And I think that's what a lot of people would have preferred, because he kind of sold this to us as a really articulated figure. You can see from that checklist he provided us where he was kind of going on about all the new articulation, which is great, but you can't really take advantage of a lot of it because this big old cape is stuck to him. Like, you can't really make him do any dynamic crouching positions or anything like that because he's got this crazy cape stuck to him. Like, I think he'll look awesome on display. I'm just going to display him like this. But, you know, if you really wanted to play with this thing, you can't, really. So for articulation, he's got the ankles. So it's a rocker ankle, so he can go to, and his toes as well. So toes go up and down. The foot goes back and forth and forward and backward. He's got a swivel right here at the cuff. And then his knees, you can see he's got double jointed knees there with the two pins. So he should be able to kick his leg right back. But again, it's hard to get a whole lot of movement because the cape is in the way. For the waist, so he's got a waist swivel there. So, and it turns, so it's not just side to side. There's a little bit of up and down with it as well. But Todd McFarlane had talked about maybe giving us an ab crunch, but he didn't want the joint to be super obvious, so he was talking about maybe making the chest out of a softer material. I'm not sure how I felt about that. Some people really wanted it. I'd be worried that it might deteriorate over time and you'd get like holes in it or something. So I think I prefer this, the solid chest. But again, it's not a Marvel Legend as far as articulation goes. Now the arms, so he does go out this time, unlike the 94 version, but they can't go too high up because the cape blocks them. Now he does move at the elbows. It's a single joint on the elbow, unlike the knee. So he should be able to get a somewhat decent range of movement, but not much, to be honest with you. And then for the hands, he's got swivels on the wrists, so they can turn and go up and down. Now here's the weirdest bit, is the head. So he's got this crazy joint on the neck, which I don't know why he did this, but it looks super weird. So you can turn the head. So if I hold the neck in place, I can still make the head go from side to side. So the head has kind of got a more traditional ball joint, so you can go up and down. You can't go up that high because the cape gets in the way. But then this other joint on the neck is just super awkward. Like, I kind of wish the neck was just part of the torso without any movement, and then you could move the head around on top of the neck. But because of how it's awkwardly cut, when you move the neck around, like, look at this. You get this weird joint that looks like he snapped his head off. And I just don't get it. So, you know, he's cool, and you can get some cool, menacing standing poses like this. But you can't get a ton more out of them. Anyway, so let's take a look at the accessories this guy came with. So here's the sword. We saw that earlier. So really cool kind of skull pattern on there. This is all sculpted into it. You know, it's nice to have the paint apps. It's got this kind of nice wash of black over the silver, so it brings out all the detail. The Spawn logo there. Some green, some black. So yeah, pretty cool sword. Very big. Then the gun. So this is a big crazy gun. So there's some different paint apps on there, so it's not just a solid hunk of black. So it's got some silver with the black. It looks good. Looks like mine might be a little bent. I'll probably have to straighten that out. But I actually don't think I'll be displaying my Spawn with the gun, so this will probably just end up in a spare parts bin anyway. But it is a cool gun. Then for the necroplasm, I'm calling it. So he's got this bit here, which you can see how it's sculpted here. Kind of fits. He can fit his fingers around it. So, you know, that could be like an energy blast, and that's kind of neat. And then he also has a little knife made out of the same translucent green. So I don't think he has a sheath or anything for that, so you can put that in his hand. But again, I don't think I've ever seen Spawn use a little necro dagger like this. So this will probably end up in my spare parts bin. He has the display base, which has the record-setting action figure. So it's not a big base. Like, you can't fit both feet on it really, but it does help to keep him steady. Now, mind you, the cape does a pretty good job of holding him in place. I'm not worried about this guy toppling over, but I always appreciate when a toy company gives us a display base. Then for his extra hands, so he's got 4 additional hands. So right now you can see he's got an open hand here, and he's got kind of a gripping hand here. So he's also got a gripping hand for the right. And he's got this hand for the right, which has a hole in it, kind of like the original 94 figure. So that way he can hold, I'm not sure actually, the sword or the gun. I don't know if any of this stuff will actually fit in that hole, but it might work with some of the other accessories. Like if you are one of the people who got the bat, or like the hunk of wood with the nail in it, that's the hand you would probably want to use. So he has that same hand for the left as well. And then he has another kind of open claw hand. So you can give him 2 open claw hands if you like. And then the last accessory, which is really cool, is the unmasked head. And there's a lot of crazy sculpted detail in this guy. So he's screaming. You can see that kind of green necro spit in his mouth. It looks like you can see his skull through there as his burnt skin is peeling away. So really cool, but I have some problems with it as well. If the neck worked the way I suggested and this head was just that head, and you could plop it on there, that would work great. But instead, he's given us all this extra bit of the neck. And you can see, unlike the masked head, this isn't 2 pieces. So you can't turn the neck and the head separately. You can only move this as one piece. And it fits really awkwardly. So if I pop his head off here, which comes off, the head and the hands all come off pretty easy. You can see there's just a peg like that there. Trying to put this head on here, it's super awkward. I might have to wrestle with it for a minute, and I'll come back to you. Okay, so here's the screaming head in place. So it looks cool, but as soon as you start turning his head, like, it pops right off, because the way that neck is sculpted, it just doesn't allow for you to move it anywhere. It's just really weird. So you can only look in certain directions, otherwise it just comes undone. So for somebody who's been making toys as long as Todd, I really don't understand the logic behind that, because you know, if I chose to display it just like this, say, with him kind of yelling up in the air, you get this gap between his neck and the collar of his suit, and it just looks weird. So with this head, you almost have to display him yelling down at the ground or something. That's the only way it really seems to work. It's the only way I can get it to work. And even then, if you get up close, it's still, the head just doesn't quite line up. So yeah, whatever. So that's the biggest flaw with this figure. It's kind of hard to pose. The extra head, it's weirdly articulated. So this figure is not perfect, but for you know, the cost of it and everything and what we got, it's still a great figure. I'd still recommend it. If you're a Spawn fan, I think it's probably the best Spawn figure we've ever got of like the classic Spawn, you know, not including any of the weird, you know, alien variations and all that sort of stuff. For just classic Al Simmons Spawn, I think you kind of need this in your collection. But I would definitely recommend you display it with this head. So now let's take a look at the modern Spawn. So here he is outside of the packaging. And I'm not going to go over all the articulation again because by and large he's the same figure. But where he differs is this boot. So he's got this big crazy boot, which you can see here, it's kind of hollowed out at the bottom. But that's some really cool sculpted detail. I really like that boot on Spawn. And then the other major difference is the gauntlet. So now we can finally see that in a little bit more detail. So again, it's covered in spikes, this kind of armored glove. It's a really cool upgrade from the standard kind of, you know, just those kind of gloves that he had on the original. And then the other major difference is on the paint on the chest. So you can see this guy's, the M is black, whereas the M on him is red. He's also got kind of the red Superman underwear on here, which is a little silly if you think about it. So I do like this look better with the black. And yeah. So otherwise, the cape is the same. Everything's the same. That folds over nice here. This one here, I'm having the same problems there. It's still, it doesn't have the same, doesn't snap into place the way this side does. So I'm not sure what's going on there. So yeah, let's look at the heads. The accessories is where this figure differs the most. So actually, before I get into the heads, I'll show you the other stuff. So he's got the same display base as the other guy. He's also got the same Necro sword and Necro blast. Now he comes with a different gun. And I've got one of his extra hands holding it. So you can see this gun here, it's quite a bit different from the gun that we got with the other guy. This one's got the big, I don't know what you call this, where you put the ammo here, big ammo clip on the bottom. It's got like looks like a rocket launcher on the top, and it's gold instead of silver, and it's just a little shorter and stubbier. So both really cool guns. And as for hands, he's got the same extra hands. So like I said, I've got one there holding the gun, and then he's got the hands with the holes in them, and the gripping hands, the fist hands. Now these hands, you can interchange them. You could put these hands on the modern hands on the classic Spawn, but they wouldn't match up as good. Like you can see, the classic Spawn had the red hands, where the modern Spawn has black hands. So they're sculpted the same, but they are different colors. And then, so the other major accessory is the head. So the classic Spawn had this unmasked head, which is the screaming hamburger head. And you can see it's, other than the burn, there's no other issue, no other damage on the face. But there was a point in the comic books where his face got like split open, and he had to use his like daughter's shoelace to stitch his own face back together. So that's what you're seeing on this figure, and it's pretty grim looking. It's pretty cool. You get that gore on the side, the shoelace running right through the front of his face. I really like that head. If I could have got this head with the masked head on one figure, I only would have bought one figure. Probably the modern figure, so that way I'd have the boot and the glove. But yeah, I don't mind. This is a cool enough figure. I don't mind getting the two of them. Now, the issue is, though, with this head. Like, this also doesn't have an articulated, like, jawline. So it's all one sculpted piece. And so in certain poses, it looks good. Like, looking down like that works. But as soon as you turn him around, like, you see how awkward that is? It's, like, coming up. If he wants to turn and talk this way, you get this hella weird gap on his neck here. He's, like, dislocated his shoulder or something. Again, I'm boggled by this decision. So I thought for sure I would display this Spawn with this head, and I might still, because once I'm done kind of playing with it and taking my photos for Instagram, it's just going to go in a cabinet, and I could probably pose them with like this so it looks cool. But I might actually go with the alternate head. So the second head with this guy is the human head, the Al Simmons before he was all burned up. And like the masked head, it has 2 points. So you can see it's got the weird neck, but it also is articulated on the head. So it's a separate piece from the neck, so you can turn that around. And that just works a lot better. So if I pop this head off, and pop this head on, there we go. That just looks a lot better because you can kind of get the neck in place, and then you can turn the head whichever way you want. Now, if I was going to display him with this head, I do kind of wish the neck was black to match the costume. Maybe it's just me, but I hate like wide neck t-shirts. I like the necks of my t-shirts to be as snug as possible, and I just don't like this. It looks like he's got a big dip in his t-shirt. I'd rather the black came right up and then it was just his head was unmasked. So that's the main deterrent for me not wanting to use this head. Like, it's a beautifully sculpted piece, but like it's just not as cool as the stitched up face. Like, that's a really cool sculpt. So it's just a shame that it's got that weird neck and no articulation around the jawline. So there you go. There's classic and modern Spawn. I don't know if I have anything else more to say. Like I said, I'd recommend them. They're both good figures. Not perfect, but maybe Todd will get there on his next go around. Okay, so that is my review and unboxing of the Kickstarter Spawns, both the classic and the modern. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, much appreciated, and please leave me some comments below. So I guess that's it for now. So thank you again very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Ciao.